All right, welcome to the show. So I'm here with Anna Krueger. She's actually been a sales leader since 2006. She joined the real estate industry in 2013, became quickly a top agent in the industry, one of the top in the industry. And during her first year at the Haro Group, she contributed about 46% of the team's closings as a direct result of her lead gen and conversion efforts, lead generation. She accumulated more than 28,000 hours of sales experience. Am I right about that? 28,000 hours,
Yeah,
probably more now.
yeah, I think I calculated that a couple years ago. So
Yeah,
somewhere,
probably more.
yes,
So probably 35, 40.
yeah.
And trained over 39,400 salespeople in her career. In 2015, she joined MAPS Coaching, which is Mega Agent Production Systems Coaching, and specializes in the skill of lead generation, conversion. She'll talk about her course as well today and what she's doing right now. And she has a passion to help buyers, sellers, inside sales agents, or people in general in other professions succeed at sales. So welcome to the show, Anna.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Sam. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself, your story, what got you into sales. What's your role right
Yeah.
now as well?
Yeah. So I used to be a high school teacher, and I always said I would never do business or sales. So here we are. But what switched for me was when I left teaching, I became a college recruiter and quickly realized, oh, this is 100% sales, but I actually liked it. And what helped me like it was my leader challenged me. She said, quit thinking like a salesperson and think like a teacher,
Mm.
because a lot of sales is education. And when she said that, it switched something in my brain. And I actually came to really love sales. So I sold, or it sounds funny to say I sold college enrollments, but I recruited students to college for many years. And then I hit a ceiling because education, they cannot pay commission. So you could have great salespeople working in the education field, but the Department of Ed limits how much they can make, really, because of all the laws and whatnot. So I got recruited into real estate and quickly realized nobody was teaching language patterns. I was actually at a conference in 2014, and I was in the role of inside sales, which is full-time lead gen, lead conversion. So for those that maybe aren't as familiar or in another industry, in real estate, you usually lead generate in the morning and then go work with your clients in the afternoon. But inside sales lead generates all day. And I went to a conference in 2014, and there was another inside sales agent walking with me down the hall. And they complained and they said, there's nothing here for us. Everything is for buyer agents and listing agents. And I remember looking at him and saying, yeah, that's called opportunity. So I decided then that I was going to work to gain a track record in real estate so I'd have some credibility in the field. And then I launched a training program about a year later. And that's been my main thing ever since. I love it and it's my passion. So that's the business side of Anna Krueger.
No, thanks for sharing. There's a lot definitely to unpack there. You also mentioned more of a teacher rather than a salesperson. Do you feel that there's a bit of a programming from society that salespeople do things to people rather than for them, and how you have to be their advisor and collaborate with them? Can you share a little bit more about with how you shift people's mindset around sales?
Yeah. So I compare the best salespeople to be very similar to a coach or to a teacher. So let's use the coach analogy. The job of a coach is ultimately to get whoever they're coaching where they want to go, whether it's be a basketball team, a business coach, a health coach. The first thing we have to do as a coach is ask, well, what's your goal? What do you want to accomplish? And then everything from that point forward becomes removing obstacles, possibly educating, inspiring to help the goal get achieved. So in sales, we really are coaches. So we are buyer coaches, seller coaches. And the first job is to find out, well, what makes you want to move in the first place if I'm a real estate agent? And once I know why you want to move, that's really the central topic of all of our conversations, is how to help you get the thing that you just said you wanted. So I really do believe people that are the best in sales think like coaches, they think like teachers. And when you're good at that, you naturally will have sales. And yeah, you need to know some sales techniques and whatnot. But honestly, they're not much different than coaching techniques. Having been trained in coaching and sales, it's basically the same thing. And I find when the best salespeople grab onto that and actually get pretty passionate about it. They tell me they enjoy their job a lot more when they're not thinking of themselves as a salesperson and they think like a coach or a teacher.
Thanks for sharing that. So like, how does it shift their mindset? You know, because you mentioned like there's probably a lot of tactical things you could teach them to get better in their industry. It could be real estate or anything in sales, but yeah, how does it help them with their mindset around being able to execute? Because maybe their mindset is around whether it's programming or utilizing the patterns or asking the questions. Like, what gets in people's way to actually be bold enough to ask the questions and dive deep with these people, you think?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the big difference is, and I'm making a generalization here and I
Mhm.
realize that, but
Okay.
generally when we're thinking as a salesperson, we're thinking I need to sell this person on whatever it is I have to offer or on myself as a person. And when you're thinking like a coach or a teacher, you're now more in question mode. So it shifts the focus from me to the client. And so it really becomes, tell me about you. What are you passionate about? What are you hoping to accomplish through working on this goal? It's a lot easier not to move. What makes you want to move because
Yeah.
that's a big task. And when we're really clear on that, I find the agents I work with anyway, when they know the client motivation, they get way more inspired to help them achieve it because now they know why they're doing it. It's not just a sale, it's not just a closing. It's a family having more time because they live closer to work. So now we're home at night to read the kids a story before they go to bed versus a 2-hour commute. So I just find people get a lot more engaged as agents or salespeople themselves when they get the goal of the client.
So really being centric around the client, like emotionally helping them move through, reminding them. So I think you
Yeah.
said as well, there's a lot of inertia keeping people from making decisions. So helping remind them why they're doing this in the first place could be important, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And especially, I coach sales in other industries as well, but I'm assuming most of your audience is probably real estate sales. Would
Yeah, we
you?
have people in whether they're selling, and this is what I wanted to bring you on because whether you're selling an investment opportunity, whether you're selling a business, whether you're selling a business to business or clients about a new opportunity you have, there's always persuading, there's always influencing.
Right.
So
Yeah. And so I think what you just said is really important. There's always persuading. And when people are sold on their own goals, they're persuading themselves, right? So the way I would describe it is if I'm, a real estate agent, we have to understand that most people don't have to move and take whatever product, if as you're listening
yeah,
to
of
this, what
course.
product
Yeah,
you
whatever
sell.
that product is, absolutely.
Um, but most people don't have to buy whatever it is you're selling. They don't have to move. There's always going to be a percentage that has to. So what we have to recognize is when you don't have to do something, we procrastinate. That's very common, especially the more overwhelming it is, the more likely we are to procrastinate. So unless my goal is front and center, why would I? So here's a really basic analogy. I just had a backyard movie night at my house Saturday night. We watched Back to the Future. We sat around a bonfire. It
Oh,
was
love, great movie.
yes, it was like old school, super fun. And I've had laundry that I've needed to fold sitting in a laundry basket in my living room for about a week. And guess what? Saturday afternoon, about 2 hours before people arrived, all of a sudden I got into action because motivation was there. People are going to be in my house in two
Yeah,
hours.
the thought of what people are, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's such a basic analogy, but the point is, even folding laundry, I procrastinated until my motivation was high enough of like, okay, let's just get this done. So now let's say we're moving our entire house and packing it up and putting it into a truck to move across town. Why would I do that unless I'm very clear of my personal motivation? So if we're in that category of people that wants to move but doesn't have to move, the only way we're really going to get into action there is if our motivation is very high and we need someone to ask us questions to pull it out of us. Does that make sense? I kind of
Yeah,
made that word.
absolutely. Yeah, it's very helpful actually. Do you find that people are you sort of is it a numbers approach where you talk to as many people as possible and ask the right questions and then they're intrinsically motivated? Because we've all worked with people who've had their own motivations and they're driven, they're doing it, they're filling out the application, they're making things happen. Or do you just use these language patterns to better understand, build rapport, and then sort them appropriately so then you can touch base with them in a relevant way later on?
Yeah, I actually think it's both. So when someone is new in sales, any industry, just talk to as many people as you can, because even if your skill isn't very high yet, if you just talk to enough people, you'll bump into someone who says, "Oh yeah, I was just thinking I needed an agent. I'm so glad you called me." And that usually you can find someone within 100 people picking up the phone, even if you have very low skill. But also working on skill, you'll get better at the people who pick up who initially don't seem interested. But as you
Mhm.
engage them, so for example, let's say a lead came in over the internet last month and you call them and they just don't sound that interested. Oh, yeah, I was just casually looking around. If you're skilled, instead of saying, okay, bye, you'll instead say, yeah, well, what even made you want to look at houses a month ago? You could have been looking at anything online. What made you choose real estate? And as they start to talk and they start to share their motivation, now maybe I'll set an appointment in way less than that 1 out of 100. Maybe I'll get closer to 1 out of 20 because
Right.
my skill is up. So it's both. I need quantity, but I also need quality. And the thing is, as your quality of conversation goes up, you won't need to talk to as many people. And frankly, Sam, that's why I get excited to coach. Is I had somebody in my class right now tell me, I'm a single mom with 2 kids at home. Because of getting better at skill, I have more time with my girls. I'm not working as many hours to get the same
Yeah.
results. And that's very motivating to me.
That's incredible because it's almost like you're helping break limiting beliefs too, because a lot of people think I have to work hard to, make money or do this or do that. And you're kind of breaking through old programming. And you also had a client too that was a photographer that wasn't able to join a lot of the calls because she was getting so many more clients because of your success. So we should spotlight that and celebrate that right now too. So
Yeah, shout out to Becca. Becca and I go to church and she said, "Can I take your class even though it's really geared towards real estate agents?" And I was like, "Sure. Just redo the examples, but yeah, it's the skill applies anywhere." And she quit showing up halfway through and I asked her at church, I bumped into her. I felt like, "Oh no, did she not like the class or what happened?" Because she hasn't been there. And she was like, I just picked up my biggest client I've ever had. They signed the biggest contract ever. And I'm so busy. I don't have time to be on the live classes. I catch the recordings later because I'm so busy now. And that just really filled my bucket. That's why I do what I do. I love the ripple effect of I can go sell, but if I can teach people how to sell, the ripple effect of that is very, very motivating to me.
yeah, absolutely. You're giving them the tools to be able to go and do it themselves and, sharpening their own axe and just going out and creating a great life for themselves, just like you did as well, because sales pretty much was everything for you as well, right? Getting out there.
Yeah. My whole life has changed truly from 19 language patterns. And we haven't really said what a language pattern is, but it's a science of how to talk to people. So for example, what's the 3-step process if someone says
Right.
I'm busy, call me later? What are there's 3
Right.
steps to engage them, that's a language pattern. And before sales and before understanding language patterns, I very much struggled financially. I was not in a good spot. And truly, things have really changed for me. And I would say it's all due to the language patterns and applying the knowledge because that increased sales. And that's what I love about sales is we don't have a set income, which used to terrify me. But now, understanding numbers and understanding language patterns, I think it's awesome that we get paid more the more skilled we are. There's not a lot of industries where that gets to happen, and I think that's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think you're communicating like a transformation. You're being very effective in your and that there's like levels of value. I remember listening to this and like if you're on a level of value where communication is probably in that, certain level over like implementation or physical work, you're getting paid more, you're communicating a value, how you're solving someone else's problem. So I think that's huge that you do that. And I will attest your course was great. I mean, I remember taking it, a lot of useful things, open-ended, being able to help people. I've actually run into some things, and I would like to ask you this. People
Sure.
talk about sales resistance. Some people are not as willing to open up. Is sales resistance a real thing where you have to either ask in a certain tone, a curious tone? Um, is that a real thing, for instance? Because you can have amazing things to say or engage, but if someone's more closed off, is that sales
Yeah.
resistance high? And what causes that? And what are mistakes that people make with sales resistance? I think.
Yeah, I think what can cause it is tonality. So sometimes I listen to a lot of recorded calls and I'll hear, and I've done this myself, by the way. Some of these are my own recorded calls where you hear yourself and you're like, wow, I sounded like an FBI interrogator. What was my deal that day? My tone of voice was not friendly. It was more drilling into these questions. And then there's other days where the tonality is more friendly. And so you can train yourself to be friendly sounding every day. Even just smiling when you make calls will change the way your voice sounds over the phone. And so a lot of it's tonality. I think no matter how good you are, you'll run into sales resistance. Listen, if you're not running into resistance, you're simply not calling enough people. I
Yeah.
mean,
Making enough offers in a way.
yeah, I mean, you're always going to have people that are resistant. I think a good response, for example, if someone's seeming a little resistant, if I'm asking them questions about the house they want to buy, for example, sometimes I'll just ask and I'll say, hey, I'm sensing some hesitation on your part. I might be reading it wrong because we are on the phone. Have I done something to upset you? And usually, overwhelmingly, they're like, oh, no, 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 no. I'm sorry. The kids are in the background really distracting me. It's usually, it's usually
Yeah.
that. Um, and then you can also say, think of me kind of like the nurse. You know how the nurse comes in and they take all your vital signs to figure out your situation? That's kind of what I'm doing right now and asking you these questions. And then when we meet in person, that's when I'll put on my doctor hat and I'll start taking care of the scenario for you. And that they usually resonate with because it's relatable. We all know the nurse comes in and the first thing they do is take our weight and then our blood pressure. Like, seriously, how personal can you get? And that's why that analogy works well when you're describing what you're doing when you ask the questions. I'm taking your vital signs right now to know what's up.
No, that's great because you're right. Like, especially if, you're going into an appointment or whatever, you're not just going to start, I have a headache, all of a sudden you start cutting the head open and start working on it. You have to obviously, like you said, understand
Right.
what they need, what their situation is, and why you're asking the questions for sure.
Yeah.
So,
And,
go ahead.
well, I was just going to add if we went to the doctor and they asked us zero questions and they threw a prescription our way, most of us, if not all of us, would be concerned, right? And so even saying that to a client, if they seem hesitant, I'll say I'm not wanting to be that right now. I'm wanting to ask questions. So I'm not just throwing a solution your way. I really want to understand your story and your situation. And truthfully, if people don't start opening up after that, I usually find they're not people that are enjoyable to work with because they
Okay.
tend to be resistant the whole way. So those are some tips for getting past that.
No, that's a great point of view because I know there's an old model of selling in way like predicted scripts, and I know that you use more language patterns to uncover what could be everybody's different situation.
Yeah.
Can you explain to me the old way of selling and maybe the new way of doing things and communicating with people so that way you can use it in any industry, for instance, versus the old way of selling, maybe, reading a script, for example?
Yeah. I think, to be honest, I've never been old way, so to speak. I almost was going to say, can you define that for me? And then you said reading a script. So I was like, okay, I'm
I'd say
tracking.
predetermined things. You have to say
Yeah.
it, not even listening to the client, for instance.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can tell you for myself what I loved about language patterns or love about them now is it frees me to listen and it frees me to be my own personality. If I'm reading something off of a page, I'm going to have to be whoever wrote that. And that's not me. If their personality might word things very differently than I would word them. I struggled with that when I first got into sales in 2006. I remember crying actually when my manager gave me a book of scripts. I just cried because it did not feel like me. I felt so inauthentic. Now, I will say, I think if you're brand new, you need something to read off of because you don't have any experience yet. But my goal would be get off that as fast as possible and integrate the language patterns. And the language patterns are more questions based. And so that's why I love it is it makes it all about the client. If you are doing it right using the language patterns, I'd say on average, you're talking maybe 20 to 30% of the time, and the client is doing the majority of the talking 70 to 80% of the time when we're doing the language patterns because it's about them, it's not about us.
What do you do when you're in a situation where you have someone that just give me the answer, I'm a high D, give me your presentation. I'm sitting down, seller, whatever it is,
Yeah.
tell me everything. I'm not going to talk. Just tell me everything. We've all had those kind of clients and et cetera. What do you do coaching your clients about dealing with these type of clients or, customers, for instance?
Yeah, I think you just match the energy back. And what I would, if I'm on the phone and someone's like, quit asking me questions, just tell me, then I would say, some people out there would just tell you, but I want to provide high level of service. And to do that, I need to understand more of your situation. So again, and then I would re-ask the question. So I believe no matter what industry you're in, uh, and I guess there's different things people sell, but if you're in an industry where you would have an appointment with someone to sell the product you're selling, for us, it's real estate. There's a list of questions we need to know before we meet with that person. So if someone's a high D, which means they're that driver, they're very fast paced, I might just ask the questions faster. Um, for example, I might say, okay, tell me when you want to move. Awesome. How much do you want to spend? Great. Do you have a loan or will you pay cash? Okay, good. If they're more relaxed, I might say, awesome. How soon are you looking to move? Oh, that's fantastic. And how do you see yourself paying for this house? So I'm still asking the questions, but I might speed up or slow down to match them. But I'm not going to short circuit what I know works just because they want me to hurry up. I find that those big the drivers, if you just match their energy and say, this is the process, this is how we provide excellent customer service. I need to know these questions before we move on. They tend to respond well. And again, Sam, in my experience, if someone doesn't, I used to just bend towards whatever they wanted, and then they were always the most frustrating people to work with, and they took most of the time. So I really think all salespeople listening, get in your head, what is my standard that I have to ask people before I meet with them or before I make my presentation, and don't deviate from it. It's professional.
Yeah, I
If
agree
I
with
if I
you.
went to the doctor and I told the nurse, no, I don't want you to take my weight or my blood pressure or any vital signs, I just want to see the doctor, we would say that person was so rude. So why do we
Yeah.
allow that in our industry?
I
We
think
should,
sometimes if there's resistance, it's because they don't see us or someone in the real estate industry as a sense of authority. Like a doctor, they'd go to the doctor and gladly answer the questions and fill out the form and the paperwork. So you brought up a good
yeah.
point, being able
Well, and
to.
I think what you just said, Sam, about how they don't see us as the authority, I think that's why they respond well when you say, I'd be happy to give you my presentation, but first I have some questions to ask you to make sure I'm presenting the right thing,
Mm,
and stick with your questions because now I'm showing I have some authority.
yeah, absolutely. So the takeaways too from what you just said is, if you're in sales, you have to develop some sort of framework, a presentation, language patterns, which we'll talk about your course as well, which I think is great. And that you're always in sales, right? I mean, you're always communicating a value, you're communicating a transformation of how it's going to help them. How do
Yeah.
you communicate a transformation of how it's going to benefit them? Is it going back to their motivation and saying, if we could do this, or unpacking relevance, like if we could do this, it would solve this? Is that sort of a framework that you use quite a bit to help, or do you do it away from pain? For instance, by
Yeah.
not doing this, you could potentially lose this. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So it really depends on what the client has said that they want. So I believe that the first part of our conversation is spent on finding out their motivation. And for those listening, on average, that takes about 3 minutes. If I'm talking to a real estate client, for example, I'll spend 3 minutes asking what's motivating them to move. And then that becomes the anchor for everything else. So if later in the conversation they're like, I think I just want to wait till next year, you could say, well, I heard you say a moment ago, you're very motivated to get to the beach. You want to live closer to your family and you want to retire early. What's the benefit of waiting till next year to do that? And so I'm anchoring my question about, what's the benefit of waiting? I'm tying that back to their motivation. So I'm not saying isolated, hey, Sam, what's the benefit of waiting? It's, hey, Sam, I heard you say you want to be close to the beach, close to your family, retire early. What's the benefit of waiting? So yeah, tying that
Yeah.
motivation in is a big piece.
So it could almost be like, as well as like if they say, well, I want to wait, well, what's more important? Is it waiting for the job situation, or is it getting closer to cutting down the commute and not having as much stress, right? For example, you have 3 minutes.
Yeah,
Perfect. I'll
exactly.
make sure
Yeah.
to edit that out. Perfect.
Very good.
So, but as we're closing out today, share with me a little bit about your course, what someone could tactically do to start creating value, influencing in their product or industry that they're doing. And that's probably about it.
Yeah, awesome. So the course that I keep referencing during this call is called Mega Lead Conversion. And you can find it at www.megaleadconversion.com. And then I also have a website, sparkingprogress.com, that shows all the different things that I offer. But in Mega Lead Conversion, we teach the 19 language patterns that we've been alluding to. I shared one of them here just real quick. But we teach 19 language patterns. We teach the systems. We really teach the business of lead conversion. So not just what to say, but what are the behind the scenes business systems? So for example, what should I be tracking? How do I track my numbers? You know, what does my desk setup look like to be successful? How do I communicate if I'm on a team? How do I communicate within the team? What are the systems for that? So it's a 6-month program and we launched in May, but people are still signing up really through mid-June is when you can sign up. So depending on where you hear this podcast, and we usually launch every couple months. So just go to megaleadconversion.com and you can see when it's next coming up and get
Awesome.
registered.
So we'll definitely put in the show notes. And yeah, we appreciate having you on. As far
Yeah.
as being able to improve your conversion, that's what you focus on. Is there any other one or two quick little tactical things someone could do to improve their conversion if that's what they need to focus on? Is that what you focus on in the course as well?
Right. 100%. The absolute answer without question is get really good at asking open-ended questions.
Awesome.
So an open-ended question leads to a multiple word answer versus yes, no, or even a closed question is even which side of town do you want to live on? Because it's which one, basically. So which side, they're going to say east, west, north, or south, right? So a better question would be describe for me where you want to live. That's way more open. So I really believe the best salespeople are just masters at asking open-ended questions. In fact, it's what I teach class 1 of the 18 session series.
Yeah.
Class 1 is how to ask really good open-ended questions because I believe it's that important.
That's incredible. Well, Anna, we really appreciate your time. I know we're right on time here. So thanks again for contributing
Yeah.
to our family and the real estate family and people in sales in general. So really appreciate your time and thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Sam. I'm honored to be here. I really appreciate you asking me.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming on. We appreciate you too.
Yep.
Bye,
Okay.
Anna.